Good day, this is Rob. I just wanted to do a real quick run over of the presentation I did in Kentucky because a couple people asked me if I could do it. I'm going to shorten this up a bunch because nobody wants to sit through a half-hour video. So my goal for the presentation was to inspire people who might be on the fence about doing something with their horse journey. So I'm going to talk about how my journey with my little horse went and about some unplanned adventures, our plan of attack once we decided what we were doing, some crazy unexpected outcomes, the lives that my little horse touched, some dreams we had, and talk a little bit about letting a journey take its own path. Of all the photos I have of Enoch, I might like this one the most. And Enoch is the horse we're going to talk about today. This was at a therapeutic riding center after I did a demo. And my little horse puts up with kids pretty well. And this little girl looks to be about as happy as a person can be. As I mentioned, this story is going to be about Enoch. And that's him in the center. Then his sire was Sonny, a horse that I owned and had. And his mom was Regret, that was owned by Ronnie or Baron, who I'm going to talk about shortly. So maybe 10 or 12 years ago, I'd kind of given up on, well, it's been more than that, about 12 years ago for sure. I kind of given up on the horse world, and Ronnie kept telling me I needed one more horse. I had old Sonny, Enoch's sire, and I just had decided to let him retire and hang out with him and not do much. But Ronnie offered to let me breed Sonny, who was never bred a mare before, and to any of his mares, and keep the little baby. And I really put it off for actually a couple years, and finally we decided to do it. And I had talked to the local vet, and Sonny was 19 when we bred him to Regret, and she had told me she didn't think he'd probably have a foal anyway, so I thought I was pretty safe. But little Enoch was hatched, and so it started a long adventure. Ronnie and I have been friends for well over 40 years. Our ranches were neighboring ranches when my family still had a ranch in Owens Valley. And as I said in the previous slide, this is just kind of summary of what I said. But the one thing I didn't mention was when Enoch was born, his little legs were really crooked. His hind pasterns actually touched the ground. And I remember Mom and I went down to see Enoch. He was about 2-3 hours old when I first got down there. And I was looking at him thinking, man, I don't know if we can keep this little baby. And I heard this voice behind me say, and it was Ronnie, he will be okay. And he was. And by April, I knew I had a really pretty horse. He blossomed in those first few months. And it was during that time that I'd kind of thought about this after we knew that Enoch, or that Regret was pregnant with Enoch, but really solidified it with the idea of going to the National Reining Horse Association fraternity with Enoch. So as part of that, I came up with this idea of Team Enoch, and we started a Facebook page for Enoch. We had a newsletter, and I'll show a couple of those things. And everybody that kind of joined along, they got a little certificate that said they were an official member of Team Enoch, and it was signed by me and Enoch. As I mentioned, we did a newsletter. It came out about monthly. I wrote it for the most part as it was Enoch writing it. And they all started out, hi, all, Enoch here. And then he'd talk about what he'd been up to. And they were a lot of fun, and I had fun doing them. Enoch has a Facebook page with almost 300, over 300 followers. And I don't keep up with it as much as I used to, but it was a fun thing to do, and it brought a lot of people into our world. As part of the fun things we did with Enoch, we had birthday parties for him every year. Every time we went to a major horse show event like the fraternity, or when we went to the Run for a Million, we had a kickoff party, and at the Run for a Million, we actually had quite a few get-togethers there. So as we proceed from here on, there's going to be a lot of pictures of a lot of people. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time talking about each slide and who the people are, but there's a couple I need to hit pretty good. This is my mom. She will actually be 90 this year. She traveled with Enoch and I to a lot of shows, all of his major events, the Congress, the fraternity, and the Run for a Million. She didn't make the World Show with him, but she also went a lot of years with Enoch's sire Sonny to a bunch of shows. She's been a huge financial and moral support going down the road, and we've had some crazy adventures going across the country. Another person who's been a super huge help is my brother Mark. He's gone to a lot of events. When I go over to Paso to shows there, I stay at his house in Paso Robles, California. The craziest thing we ever did, though, we went to the Golden Grand. It's a ranch horse competition over by Sacramento, California. 3 days, 6 events a day. A lot of that stuff I'd never done. A friend of mine convinced me to go. Well, actually, two did. And the one guy's a judge, and he helped me learn a lot of the contests. But the coldest day we had was 108 degrees. The other ones were all over 110. Mark had to run around to get track of where all the arenas I was supposed to be to and all that stuff. And he bought us or paid for a suite for us at the really nice motel. Made that whole adventure a lot of fun. But he's been a huge part of Enoch's life and of Sonny's life. This is my friend Judy Wright. She's been a big supporter of Enoch's for a long time. She's a judge and holds a lot of cards in different associations. She judged Enoch in his very first show. It was a mare and foal class in Bishop, California, and then she judged him pretty much every year at Bishop for a long time. She's come to a lot of his shows to support us, and she's one person I have a lot of gratitude for the support she's shown me. This couple here, Mitzi and John, I met through Clinton Anderson's No Worries Club. She had a post in there one time. It was the last snaffle bit in Reno, and she had VIP tickets to the first person that called her or got a hold of her, she'd give them to her. So I actually lucked out, got them. I went with a friend of mine to the snaffle bit. We sat with Mitzi and John. And before we left, she asked me if she could have my address, and I told her all about Enoch and what we were doing. And I didn't think much about it. Right before the futurity, which was in 2016, she sent me a substantial check. She did the same thing before we went to the Congress, and she did the same thing before we went to the Run for a Million. And at the Congress, I don't know what I'd have done without her and John. My mom was having a hard time getting around. They got her into the grandstands. It was just really supportive. And it was absolute chance happening. This is the thing I was talking about. You just don't know where things are going to go. They've become really good friends, and I so appreciated the funds they helped me with to be able to go to some of those shows. It made a huge difference for me. And so as part of this story, you never know who's going to cross your path if you open the doors. What's going to follow next is a series of slides done each year of Enoch's life up till current. And there's a lot of people in these pictures, and I'm not going to spend time going through who all of them are, but they're all good friends. They're all part of Team Enoch. And for years, anytime somebody comes by my house or they come to see Enoch somewhere, we take their photos. On this page, I'll just talk about the one up here in the corner. That's my dad scratching Enoch on his head when he was about a yearling. Dad was starting to have health issues and was mostly at home. And so I took Enoch by to visit. We actually took him in the house that day. The little boy at the bottom, sitting on Enoch. When I used to work Enoch, he would, and he was a little horse. I was already loading him in trailers and working him with tarps and all kinds of stuff. He would just crash. After like a 15-minute lesson, he'd be out for hours. And so this little boy lived down there at the Air Baron Ranch and went out and sat on Enoch, and his folks took a picture of it. But there'll be quite a few photos here or slides, and I'm not going to say a lot about them, but you can see a lot of people came into Enoch's life, and he touched a lot of people. Part of the thing we did with Team Enoch is we had sweatshirts and t-shirts and caps made. And so the group down at the bottom, those green shirts are Team Enoch shirts, and she has a little group of horse girls that she works up in Nevada, and they were part of Team Enoch. The boy up there with the Enoch cap, he was following Enoch on Facebook, and his mother let me know he just loved following him, so I sent him a cap. So again, there was people that came into our lives that we had not normally would have had contact with if it wouldn't have been for Enoch. I just briefly want to talk about Jim Edwards down there in the corner. He's the friend who convinced me to go to Golden Grand. He's an AQHA judge, among other cards. And he's been super supportive to me. He was judging Bishop the first time I ever did a freestyle with Enoch. And the first time I ever turned him loose in an arena. And he's been someone who's encouraged me along through the whole journey with Enoch. He was actually the steward at the Congress when I did the freestyle. And I came out was putting Enoch back in his stall, and I ran into him. It was pretty late at night, and he said, "What was your score?" And I told him, and he says, "I think it's good enough to win." And he was right. He's been a super good friend. There's some people on this page I have to talk about. Kelly up there in the top, she makes her living hauling brand new trailers from trailer manufacturers to people all over the country. And I had always had a stock trailer. I never had any fancy equipment. And I finally decided to buy a nice little trailer. It's a very small single horse gooseneck, but it's cool. And she brought it out to us. Came from back east. She stayed with mom at the house, and she's another one of those people that fell into my life just because of Enoch. She's super energetic and a lot of fun. Down at the bottom is my friend Joanne, and I met her through Team Enoch. She came down from Canada to watch Enoch and I, or to come meet Enoch when I was at the Congress, and she's been supportive forever. Two more people that came into our lives that I would have missed had I not gone forward with Ronnie's plan for one more horse. When I got invited for the Run for a Million competition for the freestyle, people really got into it. This is Ronnie's wife, Kathy. She did her nails, says Team Enoch on it. It was a lot of fun. That same year, I went to the World Show with Enoch and Ranch Riding, and my friend Yvonne and I met at the Big Texan in Amarillo, and then she was actually showing there at the World Show, so we got to spend a lot of time together. At the Run for a Million freestyle, I came in 10th place, and I was pretty bummed out. There's some reason why I think that happened, but it did. And I was pretty vocal on Facebook about it, and I started getting some emails. And this one was from a person who actually works for the National Reining Horse Association, and she sent me this in response to my post. Had the pleasure of watching you live in Vegas. It may not have been the run you wanted, but it was one of my highlights. The love you show for him and the relationship you have is bigger than any material thing someone could award. It's something to treasure and be proud of. Here's to more adventures together. And this was another one I got. It was actually from a friend of mine. He drove his daughter down to watch us, and he wrote me, "She was inspired by the clear bond and communication that you and Enoch share. Thank you for that. And know that all of the time and effort you put in means something to a young person." And one last one. I had wrote in Facebook that after the show I went and sat with Enoch in his stall. I was pretty down. And this person wrote me, "The relationship you and Enoch have, Rob, fills my heart to see and brings a tear to my eye. What was he telling you in those moments you sat quietly with him about how he was feeling?" So this is the other thing that kind of came out of a lot of the things Enoch and I did were these associations I got through people, through emails and posts on Facebook that were really special. And I would have missed if I hadn't have stepped out there and gone with Ronnie's suggestion. So the last few years, Enoch and I have got to do some fun things. We got to be especially active at Mule Days. A friend of mine came up and rode my other horse, and then I did a little presentation with Enoch by himself at Mule Days, and did a little freestyle down at Tehachapi. Another friend of mine was doing it there. We had a good time. The upper picture is Mom last year sitting at my barn with Enoch. And one thing that came out of the whole adventure with that little horse was I found Liberty, and it was totally by accident. And I won't go into how that came about, but I've got involved with the International Liberty Horse Association, and Dan James has just been super good to me as his wife Elizabeth, and she's the one that really runs and organizes that Liberty Festival that I've gone to. This was last year. I got to judge the Invitational Freestyle. Got to hang out with some pretty cool people. There's Warwick Schiller and Luke Gingrich and Fred and Francesca and Dan. And none of this would have happened if Enoch hadn't come into my life. So I'm forever grateful for that. In 2023, we're still doing birthday parties for him. And went by, and I take him to see my mom once in a while. You can see he's almost 11, but he's dang frisky, and people still come by and get their picture taken with him. He's just been a super good thing for a lot of people, not the least of which is me. I let people ride Enoch. I think I mentioned that he's almost 11. He's still a stallion, but he's a really nice little horse. And this girl riding up the top end, she wants to learn about Liberty, and I let her ride him, and she's riding in a double bridle, which I use once in a while in him just so she could experience that. This other woman who came from more an English background, I let her spend some time on Enoch. This other guy's a friend of mine from college. He hadn't been on a horse in a long time. Many other people have got to ride him over the years. We have a local college, 2-year school that I've been invited over to do some workshops, and they're kind of like horsemanship and trick training and that kind of thing. And the students just love him. It's been a great experience for me. He has touched the lives of a lot of those students. I've had kids come back a couple years later and tell how much they enjoyed watching the things that Enoch and I did. As I mentioned earlier, we've done some demonstrations at the Therapeutic Riding Center, the Freedom of Motion, the local thing. Those have been huge. And I did those when Enoch was pretty little, but he definitely touched the lives of a lot of folks. Because of Enoch, I got to meet some of my heroes. A couple of them I knew before him, but he was a big part of getting to know them better. Up at the top is Nick Dowers. You know, he won the Snaffle Bit Fraternity. He's won the Road to the Horse. He lives close by, but gone to a bunch of his clinics and even rode Enoch. Barbara Schulte, I've been a fan of hers for decades, doing her work she does with riders to help them through their mental aspects on how to be better riders. Sandy Collier, I've known her for quite a while through clinics. And I make all these people pose with Enoch. I didn't get one with Barbara, which was a bum, but I'm going to get that done someday. Craig Johnson, he's won the NRHA fraternity, multiple world champions. I took some lessons from him. But the coolest thing for me was getting to meet Andrea Fappani in 2023. I retired in 2022, and my brother and mom got a hold of his wife and got me a couple lessons down there. And we all have our idols, and he's the big one for me. I used his products to get Enoch to the fraternity. I follow him, everything he does. I have learned a great deal through his products. It's been huge for me. So I got to spend 2 days down there and take a couple lessons. He was super kind to me and complimentary to Enoch, and it was a big deal to get to go there. Without the little dude, I wouldn't have had that opportunity. As I mentioned before, without Enoch, I would have missed Liberty. And I won't go into how I kind of got there. It was more through some stuff at Clinton Anderson's and one of his trainers, Shayna Terry, and her horse Marty, that I first saw Liberty. And I was almost 60. I'd never even heard of Liberty. But in any event, the little dude kind of took to it. That bigger picture, that's us at the Congress. We won the non-pro freestyle reign in there. It was a huge deal. And then some of the other pictures are Enoch and other freestyles. He is broke for pack and driving, and I've done freestyles in both those with pack saddles and with harness, plus the stuff, the Western riding. I do a lot of bridleless work with Enoch, and it's just been a huge adventure. And I guess the point I'm trying to make, I know it's a lot of talking about the things I've done with Enoch, but if you're on the fence about doing something with your horse and you can commit to it, you have no idea what's going to come your way. I certainly didn't with this little horse. These are pictures from the Run for a Million Invitational Freestyle. And like I said, I didn't do well there. And I think there's a bunch of reasons. I had people tell me my horse shut down on me. He wouldn't do its tricks that night. We got some things done like the bow, but the stuff I had planned I couldn't do, so I had to revamp right there in front of everybody to get it done. But there was some other stuff going on that morning. He wouldn't stop in the ground. And I don't know if he was sore or it was me or what happened, but I know that little horse has always given me whatever I ask, and I'm going to get to that in a little bit. But that day it wasn't meant to be. We still had fun, and I appreciate that I was one of 10 people that got invited for that first ever Run for a Million freestyle. It was way cool to be there. So the lessons I learned from having Enoch. And there's a bunch of them. This is just kind of a summary of some of the most important ones. I almost missed the best journey of my life because I was hesitant to get another horse. If Ronnie hadn't browbeat me, it would have never happened. Once we had a plan, I really stayed focused. And if you're going to be successful in whatever your venture is, you really do have to lay out a plan, have a plan of attack, and stick to it. And I learned to enjoy some unexpected deviations, the ranch riding, the freestyle, the Liberty stuff. It was all totally unplanned. Meeting like Mitzi and her husband and other folks along the way, those were all unplanned things. The biggest thing that I've done with this little horse is I spend a lot of time hanging out. We go for walks. I spend a lot of time letting him hand graze or just sitting in his pen with him, or we sit in a chair together and I sleep in the arena with him. He's just been a super cool dude, and I think that's helped our relationship we have a huge amount. It's important to share your adventure. Sometimes I get really down because I don't have a lot of money. I don't have a lot of the stuff that the other people do that are showing at the level that I try to get to. But then I'll be reminded by people that are on Team Enoch or on his Facebook page, they don't have a horse. They've never got to show. They tell me they've gone along on our adventures and it's been a highlight for their life. So that's been a really cool thing. And last if not least, if you dream it, it will come. Though what might come might be different than the dream, but some great things will happen for you. So I have some parting thoughts here before I shut down. This is Enoch and I at Raining by the Bay this year. We had a really good show. I got a check in every class. And part of the reason we did so good was my trip down there to Andre. It wasn't just that he helped me do some things and gave me a schedule to work on, but I felt so much better about my horse and my riding after I left there. So I mentioned Judy Wright before, and she's been, like I said, super supportive. I was coming out of a show at the LA Equestrian Center. It didn't do very well. And I was pretty bummed that she could read me. She came over to me and asked me. She said, "Did he do everything you asked of him in the manner in which you asked?" And I'm thinking to myself, yes. And she said, "If so, you can't complain." And that is so true. Sometimes I get down on how we're doing with showing and stuff, but it's never been my little dude. It's how I've showed him, how I've prepared him, how I've got him ready that was the result that led to the results we got. He's just been a super dude. This is a picture of my old friend Pard Klein, who recently passed away. Pretty much everything I have learned, or at least my initial start in the horse world from jobs I had with horses, came from Pard. The other huge mentor I had was a man named Roy Yates. But I wanted to talk a little bit about Pard here. He used to have this saying when people would complain about their horses or how things were going. He never changed his emotions. He'd let them ramble on about how terrible things were, and he'd just look at him. He would say, "It isn't the engine, it's the engineer." And often he'd turn around and walk off. There's so much truth to that. And when we went to the Congress, he was starting to have health issues and stuff. And my mom corresponds a lot with his wife, Terry. And Mom had sent an email to Terry to let her know how we did at the freestyle and that we'd won it. And Terry told Pard, and he said to tell me, "You learned your lessons well." He was a cool man and so supportive of everything I did. So I will wind up with this little excerpt from one of Enoch Enterprises newsletter. And like I said, I wrote these in his voice, but it's me. But I tried to do it in his voice. And I was having, this is the end of 2015. We're getting ready to go to the make decision whether we're actually going to go to the fraternity. The fraternity is very expensive. There's payments that are due throughout the year, starting in January of the year you're showing, and it's multiple thousands of dollars plus getting there. So this is what Enoch is writing to his team. "Robert A. and I had a serious talk the other day. He said the reality of the quality of the horses at the fraternity struck home as he watched the 2015 non-pro horses go. I think there might be a slight on my abilities in his mind, and that we needed to make a decision soon, go or no go, as the fraternity payments start becoming due in January. He said we don't have the resources of many of the competitors, and that a lot of money, that must be something people hold precious, I don't know, would be spent to get me to Oklahoma City. He said he and others have been saving for almost 4 years for our trip, and maybe the money could go to some better and more practical use. I told him this: I would be the best Enoch that Enoch can be if he will be the best Robert A. that Robert A. can be. I reminded him I might not be the greatest all-round horse to ever walk in the Coliseum, but how many of those big gun reigners ever flushed a bobcat from a Pinon Grove, or tromped up Black Canyon Mine Road, gathered cattle on the Erie Barren Ranch, pushed through knee-deep slow north of Paiute Canyon, swam in the McNally Canal, played with adobes and mustangs in Adobe, hiked across the lava fields and visited ancient petroglyphs, loped along the old Slim Princess rail bed, visited the years and fell asleep with Robert A. in the middle afternoon day, claimed champion stallion at the Tri-County Fair, climb boulders, learn to sit like a dog, crawl, lay down, perform liberty exercises, and share those gifts of horsemanship with young kids, college students, and adults alike. Not many, I would venture to say. Probably none will have my life experiences, and I want to add the fraternity to my resume so on my old age, when I write my memoirs, I can reflect on how I made the big guns work a little harder. So that was, I had a lot of trepidations about going down there. We went, we did well. I had one little bobble, but a whole bunch of us went down there and people got to follow along, and it was a lot of fun. So that's the end of my presentation. It was quite a bit longer in Kentucky. Uh, the little dude, I mean, he was sleeping in my lap when he was a foal. He still does it today. So I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks.